I'm Brittany Mitchell, 34 years old, and I still remember the cold sting of that morning like it just happened. It was the day I realized that protecting my child would cost me the very people who were supposed to protect me. The sun hadn't even fully risen when it started. The house was quiet unnervingly, so as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I had come back to my parents' home for a week, just a week after escaping a messy separation. I needed rest. I needed time. Most of all, I needed my son Eli to feel safe. Eli was 5. Bright-eyed, constantly curious, and bursting with a kind of noisy, chaotic energy that made silence seem like a punishment. He wasn't a difficult child, just expressive, and he was all I had left. That morning, he had woken up earlier than everyone else and was playing with his toy dinosaurs in the hallway, making soft, roaring sounds. Harmless sounds, the kind that fill a home with life if anyone bothers to listen. My father didn't. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, heavy-measured, angry. A door creaked, then slammed. His voice rang out like a gunshot. "Does this kid ever shut up?" I froze in the kitchen. My coffee spilled as I gripped the edge of the counter. Seconds later, I heard Eli's giggle turn into a whimper. I rushed out just in time to see my father towering over him, one hand raised, not yet striking, but close. Too close. "Dad!" I shouted, stepping between them, shielding Eli with my body. "What the hell are you doing?" He stared at me, breathing hard. "He needs discipline." "You let him run wild." "He's 5, I snapped. "He's not hurting anyone. He's just playing." Too loud. Too much. Like his father. That line. That name. I felt my whole body clench. I knew what he meant. He had never liked my ex, and he had always treated Eli like a living reminder of a decision he didn't approve of. "Go back to bed." My mother's voice came faintly from the hallway. She didn't even look at us. My father's hand dropped, but the damage was done. I could feel Eli's little hands gripping the hem of my sweater. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the tension, the heat, the rejection. "We're leaving," I said. My dad scoffed. "You always were dramatic." I didn't pack. I didn't grab anything but my bag and Eli's hoodie. It was still early, the air biting cold. I carried Eli out of the house barefoot, his little toes curling against my arm. He didn't cry. Not then. But I did. I cried as I walked down the street with nowhere to go. My phone buzzed in my back pocket, texts from my mother. "You're being ridiculous." He didn't mean it. Don't throw away your family over a moment. But it wasn't a moment. It was a lifetime. Years of subtle undermining. Of being told to calm down when I stood up for myself. Of being compared to my sister, who had a real family, as they always said. I had swallowed it all. Until now. I found a 24-hour diner and sat in the corner booth with Eli asleep in my lap. The waitress, an older woman with silver curls and kind eyes, brought us pancakes and extra syrup without asking. I hadn't realized how hungry we both were. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. She slid me a napkin and a pen. "Write it down. Sometimes the page listens better than people do." And I did. That morning, I started a journal I still keep to this day. The first sentence I ever wrote. "Today, my parents chose silence over my son's safety." That was the beginning. The beginning of a long, painful, necessary journey. Of realizing that family isn't defined by blood or proximity or holiday cards. It's defined by who shows up when it matters. And on that cold morning, no one showed up for Eli. So I did. And I wouldn't stop until he was safe for good. The next morning, I woke up on the stiff cushions of a women's shelter lobby, Eli still curled up against me like a frightened animal. His little hand was wrapped around a piece of my sweater knuckles white. He hadn't let go all night. A kind volunteer named Marissa approached us with a gentle smile and 2 warm cups of hot chocolate. "You can stay for up to 3 nights, she said softly. "After that, We'll do our best to help you transition into housing or connect with legal support. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Thank you, I whispered. I hated being here. Not because it was cold or crowded or unfamiliar, but because it meant I'd finally admitted that I had no one else to turn to. That admission stung worse than the rain from yesterday. Eli stirred awake and blinked up at me. Mommy, do we live here now? No, baby, I said, brushing his hair back. Just for a little while, okay? He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He was trying to be brave, but I knew the questions were piling up inside him. Questions I didn't yet know how to answer. Later that afternoon, while Eli was coloring in the children's room, I sat with a caseworker named Angela. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone, the kind that made you feel seen even when you didn't want to be. Tell me what happened, she said, notebook in hand. I started slowly, carefully, trying not to let my voice shake. But as I described what had happened with my father, how quickly his temper had turned, how my mother stood by and said nothing, how Eli had cowered behind me with tears in his eyes, my voice gave out. I didn't cry. Not then. But Angela did. Just a single tear quickly wiped away. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer sympathy that would cheapen the moment. She just wrote something down and looked me straight in the eye. You need a protection order, she said, and we're going to get you one. Her words hit like a flare in the dark. But they're my parents, I said quietly, as if the bloodline still held some invisible power over me. Angela leaned forward, and he raised a hand to your child. That was the line, the one I could no longer step back from. I'll do whatever it takes, I said finally. I just want Eli to be safe. Angela set up a meeting with a legal advocate for the next morning. She also gave me a checklist, everything I would need to build a case. Statements, dates, photographs, if available, witnesses, even drawings from the child. Anything that could help the court understand what we had been through. I spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. Every fight my father had with me. Every backhanded comment. Every time he yelled at Eli for laughing too loud or dropping a toy. The memories flooded in like a dam had broken. I realized how much I had normalized, how often I had minimized, how deep the fear ran even before this last breaking point. I found an old voice memo on my phone from a few weeks earlier. Eli had been crying in the background, and I had recorded it by accident during a phone call with my sister. In the clip, you could hear my father's voice shouting something unintelligible, followed by a door slamming. I didn't know whether it would help, but it felt like proof that I wasn't imagining this. That night, Eli fell asleep beside me on one of the center's donated mattresses, snuggled under a blanket someone had crocheted years ago. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling fan, letting its hum drown out the thoughts in my head. Was I doing the right thing? Would this just make everything worse? Would my parents retaliate? Would Eli grow up resenting me for breaking apart what was left of our family? I didn't know, but I knew this. Silence had never protected me, and it damn sure wasn't going to protect my son. So the next morning, I walked into that legal office with my chin up my folder full of notes and my heart pounding like a war drum. They wanted to silence me, but I was just getting started. The legal office was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every breath feel too loud. I sat in the waiting room, gripping a manila folder filled with the evidence I'd gathered. Printed messages, handwritten dates, a screenshot of a voicemail transcription, even a crayon drawing Eli had made of Grandpa yelling. The receptionist called my name. A tall woman in her late 40s with tightly tied auburn hair met me at the door. I'm Lisa, she said, offering a firm handshake. Angela briefed me. We'll take it from here. Her office was filled with law books and framed photos of kids' clients she'd helped over the years, I assumed. She didn't waste time. She laid out the process, filing for a restraining order, submitting an emergency petition, and documenting everything for the potential custody proceedings should my ex-husband ever try to gain leverage. This isn't just about your father, she said, tapping a pen against the folder. It's about building a protective wall around your son, both now and in the future. I nodded. I've never done anything like this before. She smiled sadly. No one has until they have to. We spent the next hour reviewing every item in my file. She was thorough, careful, and shockingly calm, like she'd seen worse and helped women fight back against it. When she read the text from my mother that said, "Your father didn't mean to scare him," Lisa's jaw tightened. That text alone shows they knew the behavior was problematic, she explained. It's not just denial, it's acknowledgement. She asked me about my ex, about Eli's emotional behavior, about any changes in sleep, appetite, or fear. He doesn't talk much anymore, I said. He used to be so loud and excited. Now, he watches me like he's waiting for permission to breathe. Lisa paused. He's internalizing the danger. The words hit me in the stomach. By the end of the session, we'd filed for an emergency hearing set for next Tuesday. Until then, Lisa instructed me to stay at the shelter, avoid direct contact with my parents, and document everything. Even if your mom tries to reason with you, don't engage. Forward it to me. When I got back to the shelter that afternoon, Eli was in the rec room playing alone with toy cars, lining them up in a perfect straight line. He used to make them crash laugh and zoom around. Now, he was organizing them quietly, meticulously, like he didn't want to disrupt anything. I sat beside him. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "How was your day?" He shrugged. "It was okay." "I talked to a lawyer today," I said gently. "She's going to help us, so we can stay safe." He looked up. "From Grandpa?" I froze. "Yeah, from Grandpa." He went back to organizing the cars. "Okay, can we get a puppy when we have our own house?" That broke me. Because in that moment, he wasn't scared. He was dreaming. He still believed in new beginnings. That night, I received my first message from my sister Michelle. It simply read, Mom and Dad are freaking out. What are you doing?" I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another came. They said you're trying to destroy the family. I told them you wouldn't. Please tell me this isn't true." I stared at my phone for what felt like an hour before typing. "Eli was scared for his life, Michelle, and you weren't there." I hit send. No reply came. The next morning, Lisa called. "We've been granted the emergency hearing. We'll be in front of a judge on Tuesday at 9:00 a.m. I felt my heart leap into my throat. That fast. "This is good," she said firmly. "You've got evidence. You've got your voice. You're doing the right thing." That afternoon, I asked Marissa if she could watch Eli for a few hours while I went to a nearby secondhand store. I needed something decent to wear to court, something that said, "I'm stable. I'm serious. I'm not just some runaway mom." I found a navy blazer that didn't quite fit and a pair of scuffed heels that reminded me of job interviews I'd once gone to before life fell apart. They weren't perfect, but neither was I. And that would have to be enough. Back at the shelter, Eli was drawing again. This time, it was a picture of a house with a red door and a dog in the yard. "Is this our new house?" I asked. He nodded. "With the puppy." I smiled and pulled him into my arms. "I'm going to fight for that house, sweetheart. I promise." And I meant it. I didn't know how the judge would rule. I didn't know if my parents would show up. I didn't know if I'd break down on the stand or forget how to speak altogether. But I knew one thing. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I was walking straight into the storm with my son behind me, and no intention of turning back. The morning of the hearing, the air felt heavier than usual. Like the sky knew something was about to shift. I barely slept the night before. Eli had, thankfully. He curled up next to me in that shelter room, clutching his toy T-Rex, a birthday gift from the only friend who hadn't turned their back on us when everything crumbled. I got dressed quietly. The navy blazer hung awkwardly on my shoulders, and my nerves made my hands shake as I fastened the buttons. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the broken daughter or the emotional mess my mother had always accused me of being. I saw a woman holding her line. A mother drawing the boundary that should have been drawn for her years ago. Angela met us at the courthouse steps. She gave me a calm nod, her presence grounding me more than any words could. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be honest." I clutched my folder like a life raft. Inside the courtroom smelled like furniture polish and fear. The judge was already seated, an older woman with steel gray hair and an unreadable face. She nodded once, and the hearing began. I sat down beside Lisa, and my heart nearly stopped when I looked across the room and saw my parents. They had come. My father sat with his arms folded tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched. My mother was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, like she was the one who'd been thrown out in the cold. And next to them, my sister Michelle. Her expression wasn't anger. It was confusion, pain, like she still didn't understand why I'd done this. Lisa leaned toward me. They're allowed to be present, but not to speak. Let's begin. The judge asked me to speak first. My voice felt like gravel in my throat as I rose. But I stood tall, glanced back at the courtroom door once Eli was sitting quietly outside with a court-assigned child advocate, and then I began. I'm here because I chose my son over silence, I started. Because last week my father raised a hand to him. Because my mother said nothing. And because I have spent years normalizing a version of love that looks more like control and fear. I laid out every detail. The verbal abuse, the favoritism, the quiet punishments, the disapproving glances. The moment in the hallway when Eli flinched for the first time in his life, and the moment I decided he never would again. Lisa submitted the evidence, the drawing, the voice memo, the texts from my mother, the journal entries I'd written while crying in a 24-hour diner with my son sleeping in my lap. The judge nodded. She asked a few questions about Eli's well-being, about whether I had somewhere to stay, about why I had never reported anything before. I didn't think anyone would believe me, I said truthfully. Because it wasn't bruises. It was smaller than that, and somehow worse. It was silence, dismissal, a slow unraveling of my self-worth. Then she turned to my parents. They were not allowed to cross-examine me, but they had been given the right to submit a written statement. The judge read it silently, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then she looked back at me. They claim you're unstable, she said plainly. That you've exaggerated your son's fear. That this is retaliation for past disagreements. I nodded. Of course they did. That's always been their defense, blame me. Pretend it's in my head. Say I'm overreacting until I believe it too. The judge's eyes lingered on me for a long moment. Then she reached for the papers in front of her. I'm granting the emergency protection order, she said. Effective immediately, your parents are to have no contact with you or your son. Violations will result in criminal charges. A review hearing will be set in 30 days. I exhaled. My legs nearly gave out. Lisa gripped my hand under the table. Behind us, I heard my mother gasp, then sob. I didn't turn around. As we exited the courtroom, I saw Eli waiting with his advocate coloring quietly. He looked up when he saw me. Did we win? He asked. I knelt down, kissed his forehead. We're safe, I said. That's all that matters. But it wasn't over. The next day, my sister showed up at the shelter. Marissa, the volunteer, came to my room and knocked gently. There's a woman here asking for you. She says she's your sister. Do you want to speak to her? I hesitated. Everything in me screamed no. But a small part, the part that used to braid Michelle's hair before school, that used to sneak ice cream with her after bedtime, it whispered, yes. I stepped out into the common room. Michelle stood there, eyes puffy face blotchy. She held a paper bag with Eli's name written on it in blue marker. I brought him his stuffed dog. He left it at Mom's. I took the bag, swallowing the lump in my throat. She looked down. I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't either, I said, until I was the one standing between my son and a man with a raised hand. Michelle nodded slowly. They're furious. Mom keeps saying you embarrassed the family. I didn't do this to embarrass anyone, I said, my voice firm. I did this so my son never has to ask why I let someone hurt him. She wiped her eyes. I'm not mad at you. I'm just sad. I don't know how to fix any of this. I nodded. Me neither. But maybe we start by stopping the cycle. We stood there in silence for a moment, two sisters on opposite sides of a storm neither of us asked for. Then she said, Tell Eli I said hi, and that his puppy's waiting. And she walked away. That night, I tucked Eli into bed and handed him the stuffed dog. His face lit up like Christmas morning. Michelle brought it, I said. He hugged it tightly. She's nice. I smiled. She's trying. And for now, that was enough. The morning after the court hearing, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in weeks quiet. Not the tense kind, like in my parents' house, but the peaceful kind. The kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket and whispers, "You're safe now." Eli was still asleep, his stuffed dog tucked beneath his chin. For the first time in days, he wasn't tossing, turning, or murmuring in his sleep. He just rested, peacefully, like a child should. I stepped into the common kitchen at the shelter and made myself a cup of coffee. The other women smiled politely, some nodding in recognition, others lost in their own worlds. Every face here carried a story. Every scar, visible or not, was a map of survival. Marissa sat at the corner table typing away on her laptop. She looked up when she saw me. "How'd it go yesterday?" "We got the order," I said, taking a seat. "It's temporary, but it's something." She smiled. "That's more than most people get the first time around. You should be proud." "I'm exhausted," I said honestly. "But yeah, I'm proud." Later that day, I met with a housing coordinator. Her name was Tasha, and she had the energy of someone who had fought through her own storms. She tapped her pen against her clipboard as I explained my situation. "No employment right now?" she asked. "I left my job after my separation," I admitted. "It wasn't safe there either. I was managing a daycare, but my ex, he kept showing up." Tasha nodded, making notes. "Okay, based on your background and the court order, I think we can prioritize you for transitional housing. There's a 2-bedroom unit opening up next week. It's small, but it's clean, safe, and yours for up to 6 months." I blinked. "Seriously?" She grinned. "Seriously?" I signed the paperwork with shaking hands. That evening, I told Eli, "We're getting a little apartment just for the two of us." He looked up from his coloring book. "Can the puppy come too?" I laughed. "When we're ready for a real one, yes." We moved into the apartment 4 days later. It had mismatched tile, creaky floors, and a view of a brick wall. But it was ours. No yelling, no judgment, no tension hanging in the air like smoke. I found a free trauma therapy program for women and children. Our intake session was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I focused on stability, getting Eli into a local kindergarten, budgeting every dollar, and rebuilding the pieces of myself that had been chipped away over the years. One night, after Eli fell asleep, I sat on the floor of the living room with my journal and wrote, "I've been blamed for my silence. I've been shamed for my voice. But today, I choose my truth. Loud, unapologetic, unashamed." The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it, my heart stopped. It was my mother. Her voice was trembling but calm. "Brittany, please, just call me. Your father's not doing well. He hasn't slept since the hearing. I know you're angry, but we miss Eli. We miss you. I miss my daughter." I deleted the voicemail. I didn't need manipulation masquerading as remorse, but it still hurt. Deep down, I wanted my mother to be the one to stand up, to say I was wrong. He was wrong. But she wouldn't. Not really. She wanted comfort, reassurance, a reset without accountability. Later that week, Eli had a meltdown in the grocery store, a full-on screaming, crying, kicking the cart kind of meltdown. It was over apple juice of all things. I knelt down beside him gently, but firmly, holding his hands. "Breathe, baby," I whispered. "I'm not mad." He shook his head violently. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet, I promise." That broke me. In the middle of the cereal aisle, I cried. Because that wasn't about juice. It was about trauma. About fear that one wrong move would send us back to the hallway where Grandpa stood with his hand raised. After calming him down and leaving the store, I took him to a small park nearby. We sat on a bench watching ducks glide across a pond. "Eli," I said gently, "you never have to be afraid of me." He looked at me, eyes wide and glassy. "Even if I scream? Even if you roar like a dinosaur?" He giggled, sniffling. "Roar." I smiled through tears. "Exactly." At therapy, I told the counselor everything. About the court, about my parents, about Eli's reactions. She nodded. You're doing the right thing, Brittany, but this will take time. His brain is still learning what safety feels like. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I wrote again. I am not my childhood. I am not my father's temper. I am not my mother's silence. I am my son's sanctuary. A week later, I got an email from Michelle. It was short. I wish things had been different. I hope someday they can be. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because healing doesn't require everyone to come with you. Sometimes it means walking alone until you build a life worth protecting. And for the first time in my life, I was doing just that. The letter arrived on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, just as Eli was finishing his alphabet puzzle. It had no return address, no stamp, just my name Brittany scribbled across the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen in 2 years, but would recognize anywhere. Ryan, my ex-husband. I didn't open it right away. My fingers trembled as I tucked it into the drawer by the sink. Eli looked up. Who's that from? No one important, I said, forcing a smile. But it was a lie, because if there was one person who had shaped the cracks in my self-worth even more deeply than my father, it was Ryan Harper. We met when I was 22. He was charismatic, charming in a way that made you feel lucky just to be noticed. For a while, I thought he was my way out of the cold, critical household I grew up in. My parents liked him. He had a steady job, called them sir and ma'am, and said all the right things. But behind closed doors, Ryan was different. It started with little comments. Are you really going to wear that? You sound ridiculous when you cry. I work all day and you're overwhelmed by what laundry. Then came the rules. Don't see that friend anymore, she's a bad influence. Don't go to that event, you know how jealous I get. Don't talk back. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. By the time I was pregnant, I wasn't sure where I ended, and he began. And then Eli was born. For a while, Ryan softened. He even seemed proud, told his buddies he had a future football star. But the minute Eli cried too long or woke him up at night, the switch flipped again. You baby him too much, he'd snap. That's why he cries like that, because you're making him weak. When I left, Eli was 3. I had no job, no savings, and a heart full of bruises that would never show on a police report. Ryan didn't fight me on custody. He just disappeared. I hadn't heard from him in almost 2 years. Until now. That night, after Eli fell asleep, I pulled the letter out of the drawer and sat on the floor with a cup of tea and the buzzing weight of memory. Brittany. I don't even know how to start this. I guess you've heard by now that I'm back in town. I'm not here to cause trouble, I swear. I saw a photo of Eli online. Michelle posted it. I didn't even know he still looked that much like me. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I want to talk. Just once. I need to see him. Please, Ryan? My hands clenched the paper so tightly the corners tore. He wanted to see Eli after disappearing for years, after leaving me to rebuild our lives from the rubble he helped create. I didn't respond. The next day, I took the letter to Lisa. She skimmed it, lips pressed into a tight line. This complicates things. How, if he petitions the court for visitation, they'll likely grant it unless we can prove he poses a danger to the child. He does, I whispered. Not with bruises, with fear, with unpredictability. Lisa nodded. We'll need documentation, records, patterns, witnesses. I hated this. I hated that even after choosing to leave, after surviving, I still had to fight for the right to protect my son from someone who'd already failed him. That night, Eli found me crying at the kitchen table. He climbed into my lap, his tiny arms around my neck. What's wrong, Mommy? I shook my head. Just tired, sweetheart. Is it about Grandpa again? I looked into his eyes. No, I said softly. Someone else. Is it Daddy? My breath caught. What do you remember about him? Eli frowned. He used to yell a lot, and he made you cry. I blinked back tears. Do you miss him? He was quiet for a long time. Then sometimes, but I like it better now. That night I wrote back, not to Ryan, but to the court. I submitted a formal notice of concern regarding any contact between Eli and his biological father. Lisa helped me draft it. We included everything: my journal entries from back then, photos of bruises I had finally taken, text messages I had once buried out of shame. A few days later, I received another letter, this one official. Ryan had filed for supervised visitation. I sat on the floor and stared at the words until they blurred. Lisa called that night. "We'll fight this," she said. "You're not alone anymore." And I believed her, because the version of Brittany who used to hide under her father's stare, who used to whisper apologies to Ryan instead of screaming truths, that version was gone. In her place was a mother with fire in her chest and a child behind her who deserved peace. Let him come. Let the system test me again. I would not bend. I would not break. Not this time. The waiting room outside family court smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I sat next to Lisa, my file folder clutched tightly in my lap. Across the room, Ryan sat alone, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His hair was shorter now, but everything else, the posture, the tension in his jaw, was the same. He hadn't changed. "Don't look at him," Lisa whispered. "He wants you to." "I know," I said without turning my head. A clerk opened the door and called our names, Mitchell versus Harper. We stood and walked into the mediation room's sterile, windowless walls, the color of oatmeal. A neutral family advocate sat at the table, a middle-aged woman named Denise. She wore glasses and had a voice that sounded like she'd heard every version of every story before. Ryan didn't speak at first. Neither did I. Finally, Denise broke the silence. "We're here to discuss Mr. Harper's request for supervised visitation with his son Eli Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, you've submitted a formal objection. Would you like to summarize your position?" I looked at Ryan for the first time. His eyes locked with mine. "I don't believe my son is safe around his father," I said calmly. "He hasn't seen him in almost 2 years." Ryan walked away. There was no attempt to check in, to call, to provide support, financial, emotional, nothing. And when he was present, he was unpredictable, angry, dismissive. Ryan scoffed. "That's not true." Lisa held up a hand. "You'll get your turn, Mr. Harper." Denise glanced at the file. "Ms. Mitchell, you've included journal entries, witness statements, and text messages. These support your claim of emotional abuse during your marriage. But there's no police report." "I never called," I said honestly, "because I was afraid, because I thought no one would believe me." Ryan finally spoke. "I made mistakes," he said. "I was young. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a father. But I never hit her. I never hit Eli. I'm not a monster. I want a chance to be in his life." His voice cracked. Denise raised an eyebrow. "And why now?" Ryan shrugged. "I saw his photo. I realized what I've missed. I thought I could change that." I wanted to scream. He thought a photo was enough. After years of silence, abandonment, and trauma. But I didn't scream. I stayed calm. Because this wasn't about me. This was about Eli. "I'm not trying to punish him," I said. "But parenting isn't a right, it's a responsibility. And you don't get to walk back into a child's life just because you suddenly feel guilty." Denise looked between us, then sighed. "Given the lack of physical evidence, but considering the consistency of Ms. Mitchell's documentation, I will recommend a psychological evaluation for Mr. Harper before any visitation is approved." Ryan flinched. "That's ridiculous. It's standard procedure," Denise said coolly. "We'll reconvene once that report is submitted." As we exited the room, Ryan followed us into the hallway. "Brittany," he said. "Wait." Lisa stepped in front of me. "Don't." But I held up a hand. "It's fine." I turned to Ryan. He looked tired, pale, angry. "You really think I'd hurt him?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "I think you already did." His jaw clenched. "You're using him to get back at me." I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "No, I'm protecting him from becoming me." He flinched like the words physically hit him. And for the first time, I didn't care. That night, back at the apartment, Eli was drawing dinosaurs on the kitchen floor. He looked up at me and said, Why do people lie? I sat beside him. What do you mean? Miss Tamara at school said her dad is a firefighter, but today she said he works in a store. I smiled gently. Sometimes people say things they want to be true, or things that make them feel better, even if they're not real. Like Dad. I froze. Why did he leave? Eli asked softly. I looked into his eyes, the same green eyes Ryan had, but filled with innocence instead of ego. Because he didn't know how to stay, I said. Is that my fault? I wrapped my arms around him so tightly he squeaked. No, baby, I whispered. It's never been your fault. Later that week, Michelle called again. Mom told me Ryan's back, she said. She's freaking out. Of course she is, I said. Her picture-perfect narrative is unraveling. Michelle sighed. I don't know how you're holding it together. I laughed bitterly. I'm not. I'm duct taping it together with coffee and court orders. Do you need help? The question stunned me. I think I just need someone to listen, I said. So she did. For over an hour, I told her everything I hadn't said in years. About the night Ryan broke the cabinet door in a rage. About the time he called me a failure in front of Eli. About how I stopped looking in mirrors because I didn't recognize the woman who stared back. Michelle cried. I thought you had a perfect marriage, she said. That's what I wanted you to think. I realized then I'd spent so much of my life hiding truth to make others comfortable. Not anymore. Not for Eli. Not for me. The following week, Lisa called. I spoke with the court psychologist, she said. The evaluation is in. My stomach dropped. And there's more history than we thought, she said carefully. Ryan has 2 prior complaints on file from a previous girlfriend. One involved threats, the other a restraining order. I closed my eyes. I shouldn't have felt relief, but I did. I'm adding that to our file, Lisa said. We're building something strong here, Brittany. Just hold on. And I would, because the truth always comes back around. Sometimes it just takes longer than we want. The first time I told my story out loud to people outside court, outside therapy, was on a folding chair in a community center basement. It was a Wednesday evening support group. 10 women. Different ages, different backgrounds, all carrying versions of the same pain. Some wore bruises. Some wore smiles so tight they looked like armor. I was the last to speak. I'm Brittany, I began, and for most of my adult life, I thought being quiet was the same as being safe. Heads nodded. I let people call me dramatic, difficult, emotional. I let them tell me I was the problem, that I should be grateful, that I should try harder, be quieter. Someone whispered, yes. My parents thought love meant obedience. My ex thought love meant control. And for a long time, I believed both. I paused. My throat tightened. But then my son, my little boy, started apologizing for breathing too loud, for crying, for laughing too hard, and I realized the cycle wasn't ending with me. It was continuing through him. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I couldn't let that happen. Not anymore. When I finished, no one clapped. But the silence was full of understanding, of gratitude, of grief and hope tangled together. After the meeting, a woman named Dahlia hugged me. You said everything I've been too afraid to say, she whispered. You don't have to be afraid anymore, I told her. None of us do. Later that night, I posted a short paragraph on Facebook. For years, I smiled through survival. I made silence a strategy. I made pain a performance. But now, I choose truth. Loud, clear, unapologetic. I didn't name names, but those who needed to know knew. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from high school classmates, former coworkers, distant cousins. Some thanked me. Some shared their own stories. A few apologized for not noticing. One message stood out. I'm sorry for every time I laughed when your dad interrupted you. I thought he was just strict. I didn't know what I was seeing. Rachel, it was from a childhood friend. I cried for an hour after reading it. Not because of the message itself, but because I realized how many of us walk around carrying stories that never get told. Wounds mistaken for quirks. Trauma masked as personality. A week later, I was invited to speak at a women's safety conference organized by the shelter. They wanted someone who could bridge the gap between victim and survivor. Someone who had been through it and come out the other side still standing. I said yes. When I stepped onto the small stage, my knees shook. Eli sat in the front row with Michelle coloring in his sketchbook. Lisa was there too, along with a handful of women from the support group. I took a deep breath, and I began. "I'm not here because I'm brave," I said. "I'm here because I was afraid and I got tired of it." Laughter, light but knowing. "I'm here because I thought love meant sacrifice, that family meant obedience, that motherhood meant silence." I paused. And I was wrong. The room was silent, leaning in. Love is not control. Family is not ownership. And motherhood is not martyrdom. It's strength. It's voice. It's protection. I looked at Eli, and it's doing what's right, even when it means standing alone. I shared my story, not just the courtroom drama, but the quiet parts. The shame, the doubts, the way I flinched when someone raised their voice, the nights I stared at the ceiling, asking myself if maybe somehow I had deserved it. I ended with this. We don't owe silence to the people who hurt us. We don't owe loyalty to pain. We owe truth to ourselves, and to every little girl watching us become the women we needed. The applause shook the room. After the talk, 3 different women came up to me in tears. One whispered, "You made me believe I can leave." That night, as Eli and I ate dinner at home, mac and cheese, his favorite, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not just survival, not just safety, but pride. A few days later, I received a formal letter from the court. Ryan's request for visitation had been denied, pending further psychological review and family safety assessments. Lisa called me first. "It's not over," she said, "but it's a good sign. A strong one." "I can live with that," I said. One battle at a time. That evening, I found Eli on the balcony of our tiny apartment, watching the clouds drift by. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, joining him. He shrugged. "Dinosaurs, and clouds, and maybe getting a dog." I smiled. "What would you name him?" He grinned. "Justice." I laughed. "That's a big name for a little puppy." "But a good one," he said. And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not defined by courtrooms or confrontations, but by healing, by laughter, by little boys who dream of dinosaurs and justice, by mothers who rise and never fall silent again. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the day they kicked me out. No calls, no texts, no cards for Eli's birthday. It was like we had never existed in their world. At first, the silence cut deep. Then it became a blessing. But all that changed when I received a call from my sister Michelle one Friday morning. "Mom's in the hospital," she said. "Chest pains. They think it might be a minor heart attack." I didn't say anything. "She's asking for you," Michelle added. That sentence alone was more surreal than the diagnosis. "Me?" I asked. "Yeah, you. Not Ryan. Not Dad. You." I hung up and stared out the window for a long time. Eli was at school. The house was still, quiet. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the boundaries I'd worked so hard to build. But another part of me needed closure. So I went. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and too many apologies. When I entered the room, my mother looked smaller somehow. Deflated. Her skin pale, her hair flat and unkempt. She blinked. "Brittany." "Hi," I said, standing at the edge of the room. She reached out her hand. "Come here." I didn't move. "Why did you call me?" I asked. "Because I was wrong." The words hung in the air like smoke. Delicate, dangerous, easy to disappear. I was wrong about Ryan. About you. About everything, she said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to keep peace in the family. I thought if we all played our parts. "You mean stayed quiet?" She flinched. "I was your daughter," I said, my voice low. "And you let him destroy me. You let them destroy me." I didn't know. "You chose not to know." Silence. "I begged you to listen," I said. "You told me I was overreacting. You told me I was too sensitive. Do you know what that does to a child?" She started to cry. "I thought I was protecting everyone," she whispered. But you weren't, I said. You were protecting the illusion. The version of our family that looked good in church and smiled in photos. She reached again. Please, I need to make it right. You can't, I said quietly, but you can stop pretending. That was the last thing I said before walking out of the room. In the hallway, I ran into my father. His expression hardened the moment he saw me. Did she guilt you into coming? I stared at him. She asked to see me. He scoffed. Of course, getting soft now. Or maybe finally realizing the cost. He stepped closer. You always had a flair for drama, Brittany. You should have been grateful. We gave you everything. You gave me shame, I said, fire rising in my throat. You gave me silence. You gave me fear disguised as love. That's not how it was. It is, and I'm done rewriting it to make you feel better. His face reddened, jaw clenched, but I didn't flinch. You may never understand, I said, but that's not my problem anymore. I turned and walked away. That night, I told Eli about the visit. Are they better? He asked. Grandma will be okay, I said, but I don't think we'll see them again soon. He was quiet for a moment. That's okay, he said. We have each other. And just like that, the weight in my chest cracked open. Not in pain, but in relief. For years, I had believed that healing required reconciliation. That forgiveness meant reopening doors I had closed for survival. But I was learning something else. Sometimes healing means building new walls with windows of your own choosing. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting people back in. It's about letting go of the grip they had on your worth. A week later, I received a letter from the court. The final hearing for Ryan's petition had been dismissed. The psychologist's report and his prior record were enough. No visitation. No appeals. Lisa called that evening. You did it, she said. No, I replied, smiling as Eli tugged at my sleeve. We did it. Later that night, I tucked Eli into bed. He looked up at me, eyes wide. Are we safe now? I nodded. Forever. I kissed his forehead. As long as I'm breathing. Then, for the first time in a long time, I went to bed with no fear of the phone ringing. No fear of letters or lawyers or looks from people who still believed silence was golden. I was free. And I had freed my son too. Not with revenge, but with truth and love and unshakable, unstoppable grace. 1 year later, I stood on the stage of a small local TEDx event, hands slightly trembling as I adjusted the mic. I took a breath, and I began. My name is Brittany Mitchell. I'm 35. I'm a mother, a survivor. And until a year ago, I believed my voice didn't matter. There was silence, stillness, the kind that listens. I believed keeping quiet was how I stayed loved. That if I made myself smaller, more agreeable, less emotional, people would stay. But what I learned is that people who demand your silence are terrified of your truth. I paused, looked into the lights. I used to think healing meant going back to what broke me, fixing it, proving I was worthy. But healing isn't about returning to the fire. It's about walking away and building something better with the ashes. The room was still, not a cough, not a shuffle. And that's what I did. I walked away from the pain, from the shame, from a family that chose appearance over protection, from a partner who mistook control for love. And I did it not because I'm brave, but because I had someone worth being brave for. I pointed to the front row, where Eli was sitting, in a tiny navy blazer, kicking his feet with pride. I did it for my son, but also, finally, for me. The applause at the end was thunderous, not because I was a perfect speaker, but because I told the truth, raw, uneven, unapologetic. That night at home, I tucked Eli into bed like always. Did you like the talk? I asked. He nodded. You looked like a superhero. I smiled. You make me feel like one. Then he asked, will you do more talks, if people want to hear them? I think lots of people need to, he said. You tell the truth really good. That night, I stayed up late scrolling through emails. After the talk, my inbox had exploded again, not with pity, but with purpose. Your story is my story. I didn't know anyone else felt this way. Thank you. I finally left after watching you speak. Can you help me find a shelter near me? I did more than answer. I started organizing. Partnering with Lisa, we launched a small nonprofit called EchoSafe, a place for women to be heard without fear, without judgment. A hub for legal help, therapy, referrals, emergency resources, and most importantly, sisterhood. We didn't have much money at first, but what we lacked in funds, we made up for in fire. Each story we received became a brick in the foundation. And slowly word spread. Soon we had volunteers, then sponsors. Then we expanded to online forums, virtual counseling, even pop-up legal aid booths at schools and churches. My parents never visited. I didn't expect them to. But once at a local grocery store, I saw my father. He was older now, slower. He caught sight of me across the aisle. We locked eyes. He gave a nod. I gave a smaller one back. That was it. And it was enough. Forgiveness, I had learned, doesn't always look like hugs and reunions. Sometimes it's just peace, a soft place inside you that no longer flinches. Eli turned 7 that spring. We had a dinosaur cake and a bounce house and a backyard full of laughter. Michelle brought balloons. Lisa dropped by with a card. My support group friends came with their kids. At one point, as the sun set, Eli ran over to me. "Can I tell my friends that you're famous?" I laughed. "I don't think I'm famous, honey." "But they said you're on YouTube and you help people," he beamed. "That's cooler than famous." I hugged him tight, and I realized this was the life I had fought for. Not the courtroom victories, not the applause, not the revenge, but this moment, this boy, this backyard full of joy. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be here, I wouldn't have believed it. Back then, I was just trying to survive. Now, I'm living, fully, freely, fiercely. For me, for Eli, for every woman still sitting in silence thinking she has to stay. Let me tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to stay just because they call it love. You don't have to bleed to be worthy of care. You can walk away. You can rebuild. You can rise. And when you do, we'll be waiting. With open arms, open doors, and open hearts. Because no one heals alone. And no one should have to.